I'm Gary, and this is Coasting with Culture. I like to combine theme park visits and riding roller coasters with various cultural experiences around the world. Last time, I started my visit in the province of Ontario with a multi-park road trip, during which I rode the Ridge Runner mountain coaster in the Blue Mountains, took a ferry ride to the Toronto Islands and explored Centerville Amusement Park, then ended with another coaster at Neb's Fun World. This time, it's a day for the largest theme park in the province at Canada's Wonderland for the sake of checking out their coasters, such as the first B&M Giga coaster, Leviathan, and their newest screen machine, Yukon Striker. So it's a little wet and rainy today, which isn't always the most conducive of coaster riding, but we'll certainly see how it goes because there is a chance that things will run as normal. Maybe this rain will kind of lighten up as the day goes on. Maybe it'll just be spotty. So we'll try to find little pockets to get some of these coasters today. Canada's Wonderland is the last Cedar Fair park that I've never been to. This will be a completely new park, one of the last major big parks I have left in North America, so I'm really excited to go and check it out, especially because it looks like they have a couple of really good coasters. Plus, if I can get at least 13 coasters today, I will hit 1,000. The weather was certainly a bit of a downer, but I was still excited to finally make it to this park and to see what it was all about. Plus, it made for a slow day with little to no wait for many of the rides. Upon entering, the fountains in Wonder Mountain greet you, and if you're there at the right time, you can see conductor Snoopy lead the Fountain Orchestra in a choreographed presentation of water and music. Also during the day, the waterfalls of Wonder Mountain offer a high dive show for you to watch. The mountain was also the source of the first day's coaster, Wonder Mountain's Guardian. This custom coaster is combined with a shooting dark ride. Most of the ride occurs in the mountain other than the lift hill and the first drop, and the seats rotate when in the mountain for you to face the screens for the shooting portion of the ride. In a way, this felt like a blend of Escape from Gringotts at Universal Studios Florida with some of the Justice League rides at Six Flags Parks. It also has a nice little surprise at the end. Thunder Run was second. This mock-powered coaster is partially housed in Wonder Mountain as well. It's a bit longer than a lot of other powered coasters, but it won't likely be the top coaster for many enthusiasts at this park. From there, it was on to the Fly, the larger version of the Mock Wild Mouse coaster. Having ridden several of these in other parks around the world, I do like them more than the standard Wild Mouse models, especially with the couple of larger drops it has, as they can give a little surprise pop of air. The coaster that was the best surprise of the park was Vortex, the Aero suspended coaster. I wasn't aware at the time that this had the same layout as the Bat at Kings Island until a friend mentioned it to me. And part of that is because of the way it rides so close to the ground and water during its course, unlike the Bat, which rides alongside of a valley. That being said, like the Bat, this is among the better suspended coasters of Aero that is still operating, and it's among the top half of the coasters in the park. This is the last operating Aero suspended coaster that I had not yet ridden. Next was the newest coaster in the park, Yukon Striker. This Bolliger and Mabillard dive coaster is the tallest of its kind and offers several features that make it stick out from others, such as being the first dive coaster with a vertical loop. The coaster is built into a new themed area called Frontier Canada, which is inspired by the Klondike Gold Rush of the late 1800s. Something else they have for this ride that sticks out is their bin system for loose items. Passengers will load the bins on one side of the station before boarding. The bins then move to the other side of the station, and exiting passengers can retrieve their items as they depart. More parks should look into adding these kinds of systems for their future attractions, as it can really help save time for loading and unloading. The ride also stands out for its first drop, as it goes directly into a tunnel in the middle of the park's pond and the far end turnaround of Vortex. From the first drop, it goes into the ride's 4 inversions. This is easily one of the park's top coasters. After riding one of the top coasters in the park, it was time for one of the worst. The mighty Canadian Mindbuster is the longest single-track wooden roller coaster in Canada at 3,828 feet long, and offers a classic out-and-back layout with an interesting placement riding through the water slides of their water park, Splashworks. But it is rough. This was a really painful ride, leaving me wondering if I should see a chiropractor after riding it. If there was ever a ride that I would be all for getting the RMC treatment, this coaster would definitely be a worthy candidate. There was a stretch of the day where the rain really picked up, which occurred during the ride on Backlot Stunt Coaster, a ride that has clones at Kings Island and Kings Dominion. One that's a great mid-level coaster, although it's a bummer riding them more recently because many of the effects don't fully work. Another one of the park's elite coasters is Behemoth, their B&M hyper coaster with several airtime hills. The first lap I took was in a decent rain, and it was hard to fully appreciate it, so I came back for another lap later and really enjoyed getting some of that nice floating airtime it gives. The layout is a nice contrast from one of the other coasters that would come later in the day. For the second time in one visit, I went from one of the park's best to one of its worst. In this case, this was the worst. Time Warp is a Zamperla Volare coaster, and these things are notoriously rough. I've been on a few of these before, but this was a particularly painful experience. Next door is their Vekoma SLC flight deck. This model can be really hit or miss, as there's been a few that I've ridden that surprised me with being a decent ride, but this one wasn't one of those. On top of being one of the rougher SLC coasters, there was a decently heavy rain at the time, and it felt like being swarmed by mildly annoying bees. So this wasn't exactly the best experience of the day, but at least it was an upgrade from the previous coaster. The upward trajectory in ride quality continued with the next coaster, their custom aero looper, Dragonfire. When you ride most of these loopers that have a corkscrew in the layout, the train tends to roll more leisurely through the corkscrew, and sometimes even giving a bit of hang time. This one, however, flew through the course, making for a fun, quick-paced ride. With only a few coasters left in the park to ride, and being close to my 1000th coaster, I went to the backside of the park for their junior wooden coaster, Ghoster Coaster. While this is a commonly cloned coaster in the former Paramount parks, this one had a bit of theming in the queue with the headstones in the ground. The ride itself is a great warm-up for the younger coaster riders as they work their way up to the bigger rides. That brought my personal coaster credit count to 999. Getting to 1,000 coasters was a journey that began with a family trip to Disneyland in June of 1994 on the first coaster I ever rode, Matterhorn bobsleds. My fandemonium for coasters started 2 years later, the first time I rode Raptor at Cedar Point. The first time I went for a shameless coaster credit was with a friend in 2005 at Jeepers in Concord, North Carolina, taking a spin on Python Pit. I hit the triple-digit mark later that year at Michigan's Adventure after riding Mad Mouse. The first international coaster was in Canada back in 2011 with Goliath at La Ronde, and the first on a continent besides North America was in 2014 at Denmark's Sommerland Sigelen with a ride on Wildbassen. Going to visit different theme parks around the world has given me the opportunity to do some excellent travels, whether on my own or with family. It has also given me the chance to meet many of those whom I consider my closest friends. With all these great moments in the years since I rode that first coaster, I felt like coaster number 1000 needed to not only be a monumental ride, but also to fit in with the journey that brought me to this point. So it was fitting that after riding 999 different coasters, number 1000 would be Taxi Jam. That's right, this small miler coaster would be coaster number 1000. Considering how I'm never one to shy away from a shameless coaster credit, it felt like this was the right one. The follow-up to that monumental coaster would be their Vekoma Boomerang, the Bat, a model that I've become quite familiar with. From there, it was on to the other wooden coaster of the park, Wild Beast. While this too has a reputation for being a rough ride, it was an improvement over Mindbuster from earlier, and I might have been a little partial to it since it has a layout like that of Grizzly from King's Dominion, which is one that I rode quite a bit when I lived only 3 hours away in eastern North Carolina. The final coaster of the day was the park's biggest and fastest, the world's first Giga Coaster from Bolliger and Mabyard, Leviathan. While this coaster does have its similarities to Behemoth on the other side of the park, it really does more with its speed throughout the layout, as there are some great low-to-the-ground moments of this ride. It also has a couple of nice airtime hills as well. I may give this one the edge over Behemoth as to which of the two I liked better. Along with some re-rides, I also tried out 2 of their flat rides, including their Gerstlauer Sky Roller Skyhawk, which you can really get some good spinning going if you do it just right. I also tried this unique ride from Huss by the name of Sledgehammer. While many people talk about how interesting a ride this is, I might have expected a little too much from it as I felt a bit disappointed after riding it, but it certainly is a unique ride. So it was a wet and rainy day at Canada's Wonderland, but you know what? The weather isn't necessarily enough of a deterrent to keep it from being a good day. The weather helped keep crowds under control, so it was pretty easy to get on a lot of the coasters relatively quickly without waiting too long of a line. The single rider line of Yukon Striker was also really helpful to get a couple of re-rides in without having to wait a really long time, especially since that is the new for 2019 coaster here at Canada's Wonderland. They have a great selection of coasters, especially with some of the ones they've added in the past few years, from Yukon Striker to Behemoth to Leviathan. They have a couple of good supporting coasters like Vortex. I was pleasantly surprised by the Wild Beast, as I've heard a lot of bad things about it, but it surpassed my expectations of it. Not the greatest wooden coaster, but definitely not the worst that I've experienced in my time of traveling around and riding coasters. And then on top of that, the big milestone accomplishment, Coaster 1000 on Taxi Jam. So tomorrow, I'm going to be heading over to Niagara Falls to make my last stop of Ontario before heading back to the Toronto airport. And then from there, I'll be flying to Halifax for the next stop of this Canadian journey. I forgot one. And I just realized it not too long ago. I forgot the Vekoma Junior inverted coaster the one known as Silver Streak. I never even saw it back there because it's tucked way in the back, and I had a number in mind of the number of coasters, and I hit it, and for some reason I didn't put two and two together that it was because I got one that I wasn't expecting to be able to get, and so unfortunately I still have one to get at Canada's Wonderland. Ugh! Well, at least it's a park I love to come back to, though.
Thank you for watching this Coastin' with Culture video. If you'd like to see future videos about combining theme park visits and cultural experiences, please consider clicking that subscribe button down below. You'll also find Coastin' with Culture on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, plus more content at coastingwithculture.com. Until next time, take care and safe travels.